The first letter arrived on a morning that felt like all the others, gray, quiet, and heavy with the weight of things left unsaid. She almost didn't notice it among the usual stack of unpaid bills and dull notices, but something about the handwriting made her pause. It was careful, almost old-fashioned, each letter shaped with intention, as if the writer had taken their time, as if the words mattered. She turned it over in her hands, her name written across the front in ink so dark it looked like it might still be wet. No return address she recognized. No reason for it to exist. Still, she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I don't know if this letter will reach the right person, but I hope it finds someone who understands loneliness the way I do. She frowned at first, unsure whether to laugh or throw it away. It sounded strange, too personal for a stranger. But something in those words lingered. She read on. The man, he signed his name simply without flourish, wrote about quiet evenings and empty rooms, about watching the world move on without him, about wanting more than anything to find someone who saw him, truly saw him, beyond the surface. She didn't realize she had read it twice until her fingers tightened around the page. Loneliness. He had named it so plainly, so honestly. It felt like he had reached into her chest and pulled the word out. For days, the letter sat on her table, folded neatly, but never forgotten. She would pass by it, glance at it, and feel something stir, a strange mix of curiosity and comfort. No one had ever written to her like that. No one had ever spoken so openly about the quiet ache she carried every day. On the fourth day, she gave in. She wrote back. At first, her reply was cautious, polite. She thanked him for his letter, told him she hoped he was well, and admitted, just barely, that she understood what he meant. She didn't expect a response. Perhaps she even hoped there wouldn't be one, but there was. Another letter arrived a week later, then another, and another. What began as simple exchanges turned into something deeper, something she couldn't quite name. With each letter, he revealed more of himself, his thoughts, his fears, his hopes. He wrote like a man who had spent years holding words inside, waiting for someone to finally listen, and she did. She listened to every line. Soon, she found herself waiting for his letters the way people wait for sunlight after a long storm. Her days began to revolve around them. The dull routine of her life softened, replaced by anticipation. Each envelope carried something new, another piece of him, another thread binding their lives together. He told her she was different, that her words made him feel understood, that she brought light into places he thought would remain dark forever. No one had ever said things like that to her. No one had ever made her feel like she mattered, so she began to write more openly. More honestly, she told him about her childhood, about the struggles she had never spoken aloud. She told him about the nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if life would ever become more than this, and he answered every confession with warmth, with care, with something that felt dangerously close to love. Weeks turned into months, and the distance between them began to feel smaller, even though they had never seen each other. In her mind, she built him piece by piece. She imagined his voice, steady and kind, his face, gentle, thoughtful, his presence, safe. He became real to her, more real than the people she saw every day. Then one evening, his letter came with something different. A question. What if we didn't have to be alone anymore? Her hands trembled as she read it. He wrote about a life together, simple, quiet, but shared. He said he didn't believe in waiting forever for the right moment, that sometimes you had to take a step forward, even if the path wasn't clear. He asked her to marry him. She stared at the words for a long time. It was madness. She knew that. How could anyone agree to marry someone they had never met, someone whose face they didn't know, whose voice they had never heard? But then again, she felt like she knew him, better than she had ever known anyone. He had seen her heart, he had accepted it, and in return, he had given her something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The kind that makes you believe life can change. That maybe, just maybe, you don't have to stay where you are forever. That night, she didn't sleep. She read his letters again and again, tracing the words as if they could guide her to the right answer. Every doubt whispered in her mind. Every fear tried to pull her back. But another voice, softer and stronger, urged her forward. What did she really have to lose? Her life was already small, already lonely. Maybe this was her chance, maybe this was her escape. By morning, her decision was made. With shaking hands and a heart full of fragile courage, she wrote her reply. Yes. She sealed the envelope before she could change her mind, and just like that, her future was no longer her own. It belonged to a man she had never seen, but trusted with everything. The train whistle echoed through the station like a warning she chose not to hear. She stood on the platform with a single suitcase at her feet. Her fingers curled tightly around the worn edges of the letters she had read 100 times over. They were tied together with a thin ribbon as if binding them made everything inside them more real. More certain her whole life now fit into that one suitcase and those pages. Are you sure about this? The voice came from behind her. It was Mrs. Hale, the neighbor who had watched her grow from a quiet girl into a quiet woman. She had insisted on walking her to the station, though her worried glances said she didn't approve. She forced a smile. I'm sure. But the words felt fragile, like glass that might shatter if touched too hard. Mrs. Hale sighed, pulling her shawl tighter. Marrying a man you've never met. It's not right. People aren't always who they seem in letters. She looked down at the bundle in her hands, the ink, the careful handwriting, the words that had carried her through her darkest nights. Could all of that really be false? He's not like that, she said quietly. I know him. But even as she spoke, a small, unwelcome doubt slipped into her chest. Did she? The train screeched to a halt, metal grinding against metal, sending a sharp shiver through the air. Passengers began to move, their voices blending into a low hum of motion and farewell. This was it. There would be no turning back after this. Mrs. Hale reached out and squeezed her hand. If anything feels wrong, you come back. Do you hear me? She nodded, though she didn't trust herself to speak. Because deep down, she knew there was no coming back. Not really. With one last glance at the only place she had ever called home, she picked up her suitcase and stepped onto the train. The door closed behind her with a final, echoing click. The journey stretched on for hours, then days, the landscape shifting outside her window like scenes from a life she no longer belonged to. Fields gave way to forests, small towns to empty stretches of land that seemed to go on forever. Inside the carriage, the world was quieter but no less restless. Across from her sat a middle-aged man who kept stealing glances at her, his curiosity barely concealed. Beside him, a young mother rocked a crying child, whispering soft reassurances. Life continued around her, ordinary and grounded, while hers felt like it was drifting somewhere uncertain. She reached into her bag and pulled out one of the letters. The paper was soft from being handled so often, the edges slightly worn. She unfolded it carefully as if it might break. You won't be alone much longer, he had written. I promise you that. Her lips pressed together as she read the line again. You traveling far? The question startled her. She looked up to find the middle-aged man leaning forward slightly, his tone polite but probing. A little, she replied. He nodded, studying her for a moment. Visiting family. She hesitated. No, I'm getting married. The words felt strange out loud. Too big, too final. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Oh, and your husband-to-be, he's meeting you there? Yes. You've known him long? She tightened her grip on the letter. Long enough. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. The man leaned back, unconvinced but unwilling to press further. Still, she could feel his doubt lingering in the space between them. And it wasn't just him. At every stop, every passing glance, every quiet moment, the same question seemed to follow her. What are you doing? She turned back to the window, watching her reflection flicker faintly in the glass. For a brief second, she barely recognized herself. The girl staring back looked uncertain, fragile. But beneath that, there was something else. Hope. That same hope that had carried her this far. She refused to let it go. Night fell, wrapping the train in darkness. The rhythmic clatter of wheels against the tracks became almost hypnotic, pulling at her thoughts, loosening the careful certainty she had built. She closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come easily. Instead, memories of his words drifted through her mind. I will be there when you arrive. You'll know me. Trust me. Trust. Such a simple word. And yet, she had built her entire future on it. Her fingers brushed the letters again, grounding herself. These weren't lies. They couldn't be. No one could write like that without meaning it. No one could create something so real, just to deceive, right? The train lurched slightly, pulling her from her thoughts. A soft unease settled in her chest. For the first time since she had said yes, fear began to grow, not loud, not overwhelming, just enough to whisper, "What if you're wrong?" Her eyes opened slowly, staring into the darkness beyond the window. The reflection looking back at her now seemed different, more distant, more uncertain. But still, she held on to the letters, still she held on to him, because by morning, the train would arrive, and she would finally meet the man she had trusted with everything. There would be no more imagining, no more wondering, only the truth, and she wasn't sure anymore if that truth would save her, or break her completely. The train began to slow just as the first pale light of morning crept across the horizon. She felt it before she saw it. That subtle shift, the gentle resistance as the wheels ground against the tracks. Her breath caught, her fingers tightening around the edge of her seat. This was it, the place where her future waited, the place where he waited. Outside the window, the world looked unfamiliar. The station was small, quieter than she had imagined, surrounded by open land that stretched endlessly in every direction. There were no bustling crowds, no lively greetings, just a handful of figures scattered across the platform, their shapes blurred by distance and early morning haze. A strange unease settled in her chest. This wasn't how she had pictured it. The train came to a full stop with a long, tired sigh. For a moment, she didn't move. Her heart pounded so loudly it felt like it might echo through the carriage. Every letter, every word he had written rushed through her mind all at once, colliding with the reality just beyond the door. I will be there. She stood slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. Around her, other passengers gathered their things, stepping into their own destinations with certainty she envied. She picked up her suitcase. The letters were still in her hand. They always were. Step by step, she moved toward the door. Each movement felt heavier than the last, as if something unseen was pulling her back, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The door opened with a sharp metallic sound. Cold air rushed in, and then she stepped onto the platform. For a few seconds, everything felt too quiet, too still. She looked around, searching. Her eyes scanned each face, each figure, trying to match them with the man she had built in her mind. The man with kind eyes, the man with a gentle smile, the man whose words had wrapped around her like warmth on cold nights. But none of the faces fit. Not at first. A man passed her, tipping his hat briefly before moving on. Another stood near the far end of the platform, speaking to a station worker. A woman gathered her children nearby, their laughter cutting through the silence. None of them were him. Her grip tightened around the letters. You'll know me. That's what he had written. So why didn't she? A flicker of doubt rose again. Stronger this time. Had she misunderstood? Was she early? Late, or worse? Was he not coming at all? Her chest tightened. She took a hesitant step forward, then another, her eyes still searching, her breath shallow. And then, you came. The voice was behind her. Low, rough. Nothing like she had imagined. Her body went still. Slowly, she turned, and the world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. The man standing there was not the man she had built in her dreams. He was older, much older than she had expected. His face was lined, his expression unreadable. His clothes were worn, his posture rigid, as if life had carved something hard and unyielding into him. His eyes met hers, dark, cold. There was no warmth in them, no recognition, beyond the obvious, no softness that matched the letters she held so tightly in her hand. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. This couldn't be right. This couldn't be him. You? The word slipped from her lips before she could stop it. A flicker passed across his face, not surprise, not confusion. Something else. Something she couldn't quite name. You expected someone else? He asked. His tone wasn't angry, but it wasn't kind either. Her heart dropped. No, Her voice failed her, because the truth was too heavy to say. Yes, yes. She had expected someone else, someone softer, someone familiar, someone who felt like the man who had written to her. But this man felt like a stranger, a complete stranger. He took a step closer. Instinctively, she stepped back. The movement was small, barely noticeable, but his eyes caught it. Something in his expression hardened. You agreed to come, he said simply. Not gently, not reassuringly. Just a fact. As if that settled everything, as if her doubt didn't matter. Her fingers trembled around the letters, those pages, those words suddenly felt fragile, unreal, like something that belonged to another world, not this one. Did you write them? She asked before she could stop herself. The question hung in the air between them. For a brief second, something shifted in his eyes, but it was gone just as quickly. You're here now, he replied, not an answer, not a denial, just something that made her stomach twist. A cold realization crept through her. Something was wrong, very wrong. The station, the silence, the man in front of her. It all felt like pieces of a truth she hadn't been prepared to face, and suddenly, the choice she had made felt irreversible, like a door that had closed behind her. You should come, he said, turning slightly, gesturing toward the empty road beyond the station. It's a long way. She didn't move. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run, to turn around, to get back on that train and never look back, but the train was already gone, and she was standing here alone with him. Her heart pounded violently in her chest as she looked at his back, then down at the letters in her hand. The dream she had built with ink and hope was cracking, breaking, and she hadn't even taken her first step into it yet. Slowly, reluctantly, she followed him, because she didn't know what else to do. But with every step she took, one thought echoed louder than the rest. I've made a terrible mistake. The road from the station stretched longer than it should have, not because of distance, but because of silence. They walked without speaking. The man never offered her name again, never asked if she was tired, never once looked back to see if she was still following. His steps were steady, almost mechanical, as if he had done this walk many times before, or as if her presence meant nothing at all. She, on the other hand, couldn't stop noticing everything, the way the wind pressed against empty fields, the way the sky seemed too wide, the way her suitcase felt heavier with every step, though nothing had changed inside it. And most of all, she noticed him, not the man she had imagined, but the man walking ahead of her, real, unpolished, unfamiliar. At one point, she finally broke the silence. Where are we going? She asked softly. He didn't slow down. My home, he replied. Just that. No warmth. No reassurance. No invitation. Her throat tightened. How far is it? Far enough. The answer didn't help. It only made the world feel bigger and her smaller. By the time they arrived, the sun had climbed higher, burning away the morning mist. The house stood alone at the edge of a sparse settlement, surrounded by dry land and scattered trees. It wasn't what she had expected, not grand, not welcoming, not even particularly lived in. It looked forgotten. The man pushed the door open without ceremony. Inside, she hesitated at the threshold. Something inside her resisted crossing it. But then he looked at her, just once, and that brief, unreadable glance made her step forward before she could stop herself. The door closed behind her. The sound echoed longer than it should have. Inside, the air was cooler, duller. The rooms were simple, too simple. A table, a chair, a few shelves, nothing that spoke of warmth or life. Everything looked arranged out of necessity, not comfort. She stood near the entrance, unsure where to place her suitcase, unsure where she belonged in a place like this. The man moved past her, setting his hat on a hook. Your room is down the hall, he said. Her chest tightened. My room? He finally looked at her again. You didn't think we'd share everything immediately, did you? The question wasn't teasing, it was flat, measuring. She shook her head quickly. No, I just... But her voice faded, because she didn't know what she had expected anymore. A wedding? A welcome? Something like the letters? None of this felt like that. None of this felt like him. Hours passed in silence. He left the house shortly after showing her the room, saying only that there was work to do. No explanation, no invitation for her to come along. Just the closing of the door behind him, and then she was alone, or almost alone. The house wasn't empty, but it felt empty of life. She sat on the edge of the bed in her small room, staring at her suitcase. Slowly, she opened it and took out the letters. Again. Her hands trembled as she unfolded them. These pages had been her world, her comfort, her proof that she hadn't been foolish. She read them. Again. You make me believe in tomorrow. I feel like I've known you forever. When you come, you'll never be alone again. Her breath caught. Those words felt different now. Not warm, not comforting. Something else. Something distant. She turned the pages slowly, searching for something, anything, that matched the man outside this room. But the gap between them only grew wider. The letters were full of softness, the house was not. The words were full of hope, the man was not. Quiet fear began to settle in her chest. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, unshakable. That evening, he returned without announcing himself. She heard the door open, the faint sound of footsteps, then silence again. When she stepped out of her room, he was standing by the table, pouring water into a cup. You should eat, he said without looking at her. I'm not hungry. A pause. Then, you will be. It wasn't a threat, but it wasn't kindness either. It was certainty, as if her choices no longer mattered. She sat, anyway, because something in her had already learned that resisting didn't change anything. The meal was simple, quiet, mechanical. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like something unfinished, something wrong. She studied him carefully while he ate. This man who had written such tender words, who had built an entire world in ink, now sat across from her like a stranger who had never learned how to be anything else. Finally, she couldn't hold it in anymore. Why did you write to me like that? She asked. He paused, just for a second, then continued eating. I wrote what I needed to write. Her stomach tightened. That's not an answer. His eyes lifted slowly. For the first time, she saw something sharp in them. You came, he said. Again. The same words. The same wall. As if everything began and ended there. As if her questions didn't matter. Her presence did, and that was all. That night, lying in the small room alone, she realized something she hadn't allowed herself to think before. The letters had brought her here. But they didn't belong to this place. And neither did she. Outside, the wind pressed softly against the house. Inside, she lay awake, listening to every sound, every creak, every breath of silence, and for the first time since she had said yes. She wondered if she had married a man at all, or just the version of him that existed on paper. Morning came without comfort. There was no gentle light, no easing into a new day, only the same dry silence pressing against the walls of the house, as if time itself had stopped caring about her presence. She woke early, though she hadn't truly slept. Her mind had stayed half awake all night, trapped between thoughts that refused to settle. The letters, the man, the house, and the growing certainty that none of it fit together the way it should. Down the hall, she heard movement. He was already awake, already moving through the house like she had never changed anything by arriving. She stayed in her room for a long time, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince herself that this was normal, that marriages built on letters must feel strange at first. That trust simply needed time to grow into something real. But something inside her resisted that comfort, because this didn't feel like strange. It felt wrong. When she finally stepped out, she found him at the table again, as if he had never left it. No greeting, no acknowledgement, just presence. A cup of tea sat in front of him. Another cup, already poured, waited across from him, as if he had expected her, or as if he had decided she would come, whether she wanted to or not. You should eat, he said again. She didn't sit immediately this time. Instead, she watched him carefully. I want to ask you something, she said. A pause, then, without looking up, ask. She tightened her fingers together. The letters. Did you really write all of them? The air shifted slightly, not dramatically, but enough. Pause that lasted a fraction too long. Then, he set his cup down. I wrote them. Simple, direct, final, but it didn't feel like truth. It felt like closure without explanation. Her throat tightened. Then why don't you sound like him? His eyes lifted slowly. There it was again, that sharpness beneath the surface. Not anger. Not fear control. You think people are the same on paper and in life? He asked. The question unsettled her more than any denial could have. She hesitated. No, but what? He pressed. She couldn't answer because she didn't know. He stood abruptly. The chair scraped against the floor, breaking the fragile quiet. Come, he said. She didn't move. Not because she refused, but because she didn't understand. Where? He didn't answer. Just waited. And something in his silence told her this wasn't optional. So she followed. Again. Always following. He led her through a narrow hallway she hadn't been shown before, toward a back door she hadn't noticed the day before. Outside, the air felt sharper, colder. He walked past the main yard and toward a small shed at the edge of the property. It looked older than the house itself. Half hidden. Neglected. I don't understand. She began, but he opened the door before she could finish. Inside, the air was thick with dust and old paper. Her breath caught immediately. Boxes lined the walls. Stacks of letters. Hundreds of them, all the same. Handwriting all familiar. Her heart began to pound. What is this? She whispered. He stepped inside calmly, as if entering nothing unusual. Proof, he said. Her eyes scanned the room wildly. Names, dates, pages upon pages of correspondence. Some were hers. She recognized her own handwriting. Immediately, but others were not. Different women, different names, different stories. Her stomach dropped. No, she whispered. No, this isn't. He turned slightly toward her. You think you were the only one? He asked. The words didn't rise. They fell. Heavy. Final. Her breath caught painfully in her throat. She took a step back. What are you talking about? His expression didn't change. You all wrote the same things, he said quietly. You all believed the same words, and you all came. The room tilted slightly. Her mind refused to process it at first. Other women. Letters like hers. Promises like hers. Hope like hers. All leading here. To you? She asked, barely audible. He didn't correct her, didn't deny it, didn't confirm it either, just silence. That silence was worse. Her hands shook as she picked up one of the letters from a nearby box. It was addressed to a different name, but the words inside, they were the same, almost identical, like a pattern, like something repeated. You make me believe in tomorrow. Her vision blurred. This isn't real, she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew. It was real. Just not what she thought it was. She turned to him sharply. Why? Her voice cracked. Why would you do this? For the first time, something shifted in his face, not guilt, not remorse, something older, heavier. I don't chase, he said simply. I wait. The words made no sense, or maybe they made too much sense. You made us come here, she said, stepping back again. You made us believe. I gave you what you wanted, he interrupted. Her breath hitched. That's not true, he looked at her then. Truly looked. And for the first time, she saw something behind the coldness. Not warmth, not kindness, but understanding. Deep, unsettling understanding. You were already lonely, he said quietly. I just gave it a direction. The words struck harder than any denial could have, because part of her, small, terrified, honest, knew it was true. She had been lonely. She had believed too easily. She had filled gaps with hope. She backed out of the shed, shaking. The world outside felt too bright after the darkness inside. Her heart pounded violently. Every letter she had ever read now felt like a trap she had willingly stepped into. And behind her, the man didn't follow. He didn't need to, because she was already here. And so were the others, somewhere in that house, in those letters. in this life she no longer recognized. And for the first time, she understood the truth she had been avoiding since the train station. This was never a meeting, it was a pattern, and she was just the next name on it. She didn't remember walking back to the house, only the feeling of her feet moving while her mind stayed behind in the shed, stuck among the stacked letters, the identical promises, the echoes of every woman who had believed she was the exception. By the time she reached the doorway, her hands were numb. The house looked the same, but she didn't. Something inside her had shifted. Not broken, not yet, but changed in a way that couldn't be undone. He was inside, standing near the table again as if nothing had happened. As if the shed, the letters, the truth, were all just another part of the day. He didn't look at her immediately. "You saw," he said calmly. Not a question, a statement. Her throat tightened. "Why did you show me that?" Now he looked at her. "I didn't show you," he replied. "You asked that," twisted something inside her. Because he was right. She had asked. She had pushed. She had wanted answers, but she hadn't been ready for them. Silence stretched between them. Not the empty kind from before. This was heavier, full alive, dangerous. She took a step forward, then another. "I want to leave," she said, simple words, hard truth. He studied her for a long moment. "No," he said, not loudly, not angrily, just certain. Her chest tightened instantly. "You can't stop me." A faint pause, then, "I already did." The words landed like a lock clicking shut. For the first time, she truly looked at the house, not as a place, but as a system. The quiet, the routine, the isolation. The way everything felt arranged to keep the world out and her inside. Her breath quickened. "No," she whispered. "You don't understand. This isn't—" "It is," he interrupted softly. "You came because you wanted to believe." Her eyes burned. "That doesn't give you the right." "I didn't force your hand," he said. A pause. Then, quieter, "I only wrote." That sentence, so simple, so calm, hit harder than anything else. Because it was true in the most terrifying way. He hadn't dragged her here. He hadn't taken her. He had built the path and she had walked it herself. Her mind raced the front door, the back exit, the windows. She searched the room with her eyes, mapping escape routes, measuring distance, calculating risk. He noticed. Of course he noticed. "You'll get tired," he said. "They all do." Her stomach dropped. "They?" she repeated sharply. "Where are they?" A flicker in his expression. Not surprise, not anger. Something like resignation. "Some stay," he said simply. "Some don't." Her breath caught. "And the ones who don't?" He didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. A sudden clarity hit. Or not fear, not confusion, clarity. She wasn't the first. She wasn't unique. She wasn't special in this story. She was part of a cycle, a repeating pattern, built from loneliness and belief. And the worst part, she had stepped into it willingly. Her hands curled into fists. "No. More?" she said suddenly. He tilted his head slightly. "No more what?" "This," she said, voice rising now. "This silence. This control. This game." For the first time, something shifted in his posture. Very slight, but real. "You think it's a game?" he asked quietly. "It is to you," she shot back. Pause, then he walked closer. Not fast, not threatening, just inevitable. "You misunderstand," he said. Her heart hammered as he stopped just a few steps away. "I don't trap people," he continued. "I recognize them." Her breath shook. "That's the same thing," she whispered. "No," he said. "It isn't." Silence again. This one sharper than before. She took a step back, then another. This time, he didn't stop her, didn't block her, didn't move at all, and that was worse because it meant the control wasn't physical, it was something deeper, something already inside her. Her eyes flicked to the door. Now, this was her moment. Every instinct screamed at her to run, and yet she hesitated because part of her still didn't want to believe. It didn't want to accept that the letters, the love, the hope had all been shaped into something else entirely, that the man she had trusted didn't need chains, only words. She moved suddenly. Fast. The chair scraped behind her as she rushed toward the door. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Behind her, no footsteps, no chase, just silence. That silence made her run faster. She reached the door, pulled it open, cold air rushed in, freedom. And then she stopped, because outside, beyond the threshold, there were other figures, distant, standing still, watching, not moving, not coming closer, just waiting. Her breath caught. Slowly, she turned back. He was still inside, watching, her now, not stopping her, not calling her back, just waiting, as if he already knew what she would choose. Her hand trembled on the doorframe. For the first time since this began, she understood the real horror wasn't the house, it wasn't the letters, it wasn't even him. It was this moment, the moment where she realized she could leave. But part of her didn't know if she still knew how. And in that silence between escape and return, she finally understood the cost of believing too deeply in words. The door stayed open, and the world waited.